Hey guys, I am going to go through and edit some of these images. So I basically just took some recent photos that I've been shooting, and I tried to choose images that had all sorts of different lighting conditions, and like greens, magentas, just different elements that we could kind of work with to showcase what each of the presets can do. I've also got images that are a little bit blurry, have that motion blur, intentional motion blur. And then I have things like this where I'm using direct flash at a dance, and there's a little bit of that motion blur as well, shooting through a windshield, direct sunlight, backlit, more of like an overcast light, just different lighting conditions, just to kind of showcase what they can all do. So I'm going to just start by, we'll click into this one first, which is a bit of a neutral. It's a self-portrait that I took of myself, actually. So I'm going to go in here, and I would probably leave this as is and just apply the presets. Sometimes I'll adjust things like the exposure or the white balance, but in this case, I feel like it's fine. We'll just kind of go through. So we'll start with the 1965 black and white. There you can see it's really gritty and raw and grainy, which I love. And it really encompasses that 1965, 1960s editorial type look. It's almost got that newspaper quality, which I just think is so cool and so fun to use. You can obviously tone down the grain if you want. That's always an option. You can lower the contrast a little bit and just play with that. But if you want something that really has dramatic effect, I think this is a great preset. The next one is the 1965 color, which I am just obsessed with. I think it's so beautiful. It's so soft. It's got this like edgy sort of nostalgic vintage vibe without being too overpowering. You can obviously as well lower the grain. You can, right now the shadows are a little bit lifted, so you can darken those if you want like a true black. But like I love this for creative work. I've even been doing a blend for my wedding work. So I take this and I blend it with the 1970. I just sort of take elements from each and blend them together to make one preset that I can use for everything. The next one is the 1970 black and white, which has a bit of a sepia tone to it. Again, it's like a really creative type preset. You would use this for creative sessions, unless you're going this way with wedding work and you want your black and white to be more of a sepia tone. The 1970 color is the preset that I'm pretty much using for everything these days. I love the sort of magenta undertones here. I think it's so warm and rich and beautiful. And if you go to my Instagram, I would say 99% of the color images posted there recently have been the 1970 color, with the exception of a few of the last color one that I showed you, the 1965, which is this one here. I've got a little mix of that in as well between that and the 1970 color. My favorite black and white is the 1975 black and white. And what I usually do with this, depending on the image, so for this particular image, I want to, just doesn't want to stay. I want to just lighten it up a little bit. So I would go over here and just lighten the whole image up. And I would also bring the clarity down just a little bit to soften it up. But it just totally depends on the image and what look you're trying to go for. So for this particular one, I do want it a little bit softer. So I do lower the clarity just a bit. So that is that. And let's just go to clear all over here. Then the next one I have is the 1975 color. And this one is very desaturated. And there was, while I was going through content from the 1960s, 1970s, I noticed a lot of desaturation in the 1970s type images. So I wanted to go for this sort of desaturated, gritty, grainy look. You can always warm up the image. You can go into your tone curve area and you can just add a little bit of warmth there. Just choose a beigey tone in the shadows and just inject that in a little bit. The next one is the 1980 black and white. So this is a really soft, very gentle preset. If you wanted to change it up and just increase the clarity, because right now the clarity is dropped down to -28. So if we increase that, it's sort of just, you know, it gets those edges a little bit more extreme and clarified. And then we can also increase the contrast if it's a little bit too soft for you. But I love this. This has such a nostalgic vintage vibe, and I think it's so cool. The next one is the 1980 color. This is a favorite of mine as well. It is so soft. Again, the clarity is dropped down to -28, so it has a really, really soft, romantic feel to it. I just adore it. The next one is the 1985 black and white. So this is like classic lifted shadows. The blacks are a little bit lighter and more of a gray, and lots of grain. Almost like when you would buy one of those little disposable cameras in the 1980s or 1990s, and this would be the black and white look that you would get. And then similarly, the 1985 color has that same vibe. And this works really well on creative projects, just anything that you want to kind of experiment with. And again, you can increase the contrast if it's too low in contrast, or you can increase the clarity if the clarity's dropped too low. You can also always go to your tone curve and adjust the colors there. So that is that. Let's move on to another image. So we'll go to this one. And I'm just gonna, again, just kind of scroll through each of the presets. So we've got the 1965 black and white, 1965 color, 1970 black and white, 1970 color, 1975 black and white, my personal favorite, 1975 color, 1980 black and white, and then the 1980 color, I think, is the preset that I ended up using for this particular image when I delivered the gallery. 1985 black and white, 1985 color. Let's go to something a little different. So let's go to this image here, which is from a wedding reception, and it's direct flash. There's a little bit of motion blur there. So let's kind of dig into each of the presets. So we've got the 1965 black and white. I love this preset when using direct flash like this. I think it's so, it's got that gritty, raw editorial newspaper vibe that you would see in the 1960s. From there, the 1965 color works so well on this image. I absolutely love the tones. I think it's perfect, and it's got real nostalgic vintage vibes. 1970 black and white also looks amazing. And keep in mind, I'm just hovering over these over on the left panel. These are all just one-click presets. Like as I'm hovering through, this is 1970 color, 1975 black and white. I wouldn't have to do anything to these images. They're perfect the way they are. As I'm hovering through, you can see that. There really isn't much alterations that you need to do to these presets. They're very much one-click efficient presets, which is just so fantastic for speeding up your workflow. Let's jump into this one here. So this is obviously natural light in studio. There's a little bit of extra ambient light over here from this lamp. So let's go through them here. So we've got the 1965 black and white, so vintage looking. I love it, especially because of the old telephone. I think that works really well. 1965 color, again, this works so beautifully for this image. 1970 black and white, 1970 color, 1975 black and white, love this. Oh, she looks beautiful. 1975 color. So you can see the variances and the differences throughout the presets. You can kind of see what sort of changes are being made as we go through. They're all very unique and sort of different and standalone presets. But the complementary black and white to color for each decade really works well. So if you're doing 1985 color, you'd want to use the 1985 black and white just to keep that consistency and cohesiveness. And same goes for 1975 black and white. Stay within the decade. So I do the 1970 color paired with the black and white. And those two look really well together. Also, 1965 color with 1965 black and white looks really cool together. So from there, let's jump into something a little bit different. Let's go into this one here. So this is a really close crop image. I've already cropped it in. It was much wider to begin with, but I really, really love this story right here in the middle. I think this is beautiful. So let's try 1965 black and white. That's a bit grainy for me for this particular image. Sometimes when you're cropped in really close, it's just a pixel issue. So because you're cropped in close, the grain really shows up a lot more noticeably. So you just want to tone down the grain a little bit if you're going for a more subtle look. From here, we've got the 1965 color, 1970 black and white, 1970 color. Look at how beautiful that looks. I love it. 1975 black and white. I love how soft that is. I would probably go in and just brighten up her face just a little bit, maybe with the radial filter. 1975 color, 1980 black and white, 1980 color, 1985 black and white, and 1985 color. Okay, let's dig into another one here. We'll jump over to this one. So this is like direct sunlight. It was a sunset, and it's obviously directly on them. So I'm going to kind of scroll through these again. So the 1965, it's a little aggressive when it comes to direct sunlight. So what I would do in this situation is I would actually just tone down the contrast just a little bit, and it just softens it up. I would also bring down the clarity just a bit. And those are the two sliders that I tend to use the most if I'm making little adjustments based on the harshness of the light. You can do so much with that contrast and clarity slider to sort of help you out in those harsh direct sunlight situations. So even just that change really softened the image and made it a little bit more pleasing to look at. So from there, 1965 color, 1970 black and white. It's so soft and dreamy. I love it. 1970 color, 1975 black and white. Again, with this one, I would probably tone down the contrast and the clarity just a little bit, just to soften it up. Here we go. And we've got 1970 color, 1980 black and white, 1980 color. Oh, it's so soft looking. I love that. 1985 black and white, 1985 color. All right, so let's go to this one here. So this was shot through a car window of the bride, and I'm going to scroll through them again. So 1965 black and white. I would probably brighten up this image just a little bit, lift up the shadows a bit. 1965 color. That looks so cool. I love that so much. 1970 black and white. 1970 color, and you can really see the difference between the 1970 color and the 1965 color. You can see the tones. So there's a little bit more of a greeny, bluey undertone here, whereas in the 1970 color, it's more of a magenta, beigey undertone. 1975 black and white, 1975 color, 1980 black and white, 1980 color, and so on and so forth. All right, let's go into something where there's a lot of green. So there's green grass below her feet, there's green everywhere. So I just want to show you how these presets work with greens. So 1965 black and white, 1965 color. So the greens are a little bit saturated. You can see I take away from that bluey greeny tone and make it more of a warmer yellowy green tone, which I think looks so good. It's got that beigey undertone, which I think is so beautiful. 1970 black and white, 1970 color. And again, you can see the difference between the 1970 color and the 1965 color. 1965 color, you can see the luminance in the skin, the highlights. It's a little bit brighter on skin tones. 1970 is a touch bit more matte on the skin tones. 1975 black and white, 1975 color, 1980 black and white, 1980 color, and so on and so forth. The last one I'll show you guys is, actually maybe I'll show you two more. So this one here, again, I just want to really showcase and show you guys how it is a one-click preset situation here. So for this one, when I edited it, I did the 1965 color. So you can see it's a one-click situation. It looks stunning just like that. You could also go 1970 color, beautiful. They are so versatile and they're so efficient, and that's what I love so much about them. The 1975 black and white, also extremely romantic looking. I love that. And we'll go into this one here as our final image. So this is one that I absolutely love. And again, one click situation here. So here's 1970 color. That to me is perfect. I would probably lower the contrast just a little bit more, just to make it a little bit more dreamy. Bring the clarity down a little bit lower as well. It just gives that dreamy sort of look. You could also go into the 1980 color, which is a little bit more of that softer, dreamy look. 1965 color. It's a little bit more harsh and aggressive, but I think it works so well here. I think this is beautiful. Again, you can lower the contrast and the clarity just a little to soften it up. And let's see, 1975, my favorite. So again, I'll lower the clarity and I might just brighten it up by lifting the shadows a little and lifting the exposure a little bit. And that is pretty perfect. So yeah, if you guys have any questions at all ever, please reach out to me on Instagram, and I would be happy to answer any questions you guys have.